We take our everyday technology completely for granted, but the screen you're looking at right now, it's actually the result of a centuries-long relay race of logic. In this explainer, we're going to unravel that deeply human history behind every app, every website, and every single piece of code you use, a history that literally spans thousands of years.
So let's dive into this fascinating mystery by tracing the evolution of our digital world through three wildly different, unlikely heroes. I know, it sounds kind of like the setup to a historical riddle, but I promise you, understanding the connection between these three individuals is the exact blueprint for understanding the digital age.
Section 1. Aristotle, the first logician.
Our story kicks off in ancient Greece with an orphan from Stagira. His father was actually the personal physician to the king of Macedonia, but sadly, he passed away when Aristotle was young, which meant Aristotle couldn't just easily follow in his dad's footsteps. Despite losing both parents early on, his guardian made sure he learned poetry, rhetoric, and Greek before sending him off to Athens at 17. There, he spent a massive 20 years at Plato's academy, attending lectures and eventually presenting his own. After Plato died, he spent time at the court of King Hermias, even marrying the king's niece, before landing a seriously high-profile gig. King Philip of Macedonia invited him to tutor his son for 5 years, a kid who would go on to become Alexander the Great. Once King Philip passed, Aristotle finally headed back to Athens to start his very own school, the Lyceum.
Now you might be wondering, why didn't Aristotle just take over Plato's academy when Plato died in 347 BCE? I mean, he'd been there for 2 decades. Well, it turns out their views just differed way too much. Aristotle was this highly systematic thinker, compiling scientific facts and writing these massive, comprehensive treatises on logic, physics, philosophy, and psychology. He really had to carve his own distinct path.
And speaking of carving his own path, he had a very quirky teaching style at the Lyceum. For 13 years, he'd lecture to his advanced students in the morning, and then open his talks up to a broad popular audience in the evening. But he didn't just stand still at a podium. No, he was constantly pacing. Because of this habit of walking around while discussing complex philosophical questions, his followers actually earned a unique nickname, the Peripatetics, which literally translates to walk about.
But here is the terrifying part of the story. We almost lost this foundational logic entirely. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE, there was this massive political backlash against anything related to him, and Aristotle ended up facing trumped-up charges of impiety. He fled to avoid prosecution, only to die of a stomach ailment just a year later. His brilliant systematic treatises, they were preserved by a student, sure, but then hidden away in a vault. They literally sat there, completely lost in the dark, for 2 whole centuries, before a wealthy book collector finally found them, took them to Rome, and preserved them for us.
Section 2. George Boole, Logic Meets Math.
Fast forward to 19th century England, where we meet the guy who translated that ancient, almost lost Greek logic into mathematics. And George Boole was the ultimate underdog. Born in November 1815 in Lincoln, England, to a poor cobbler, his family's tough financial situation meant he really had to hustle to educate himself while supporting them. He actually thought about a career as a clergyman before deciding to just open his own school. But here is where his unique genius shines. Totally unsatisfied with the math textbooks of his day, this self-taught cobbler's son just decided to read the works of the great mathematicians on his own. By reading the papers of the French mathematician Lagrange, Boole started making actual groundbreaking discoveries in the calculus of variations.
And this perfectly illustrates his meteoric rise from a self-taught teacher to a global math icon. In 1848, he publishes The Mathematical Analysis of Logic. Just a year later, despite his totally unconventional background, he gets appointed professor of mathematics at Queen's College in Ireland. Then, in 1854, comes his absolute masterpiece, The Laws of Thought. In this book, he introduced what is now known in his honor as Boolean algebra, creating difference and differential equation textbooks that Great Britain used all the way through the end of the 19th century.
But tragically, much like Aristotle, Boole's story has a really abrupt end. In 1864, this brilliant mind was cut short. And why? Because he stubbornly kept a lecture engagement even though he was soaking wet from a rainstorm. He ended up contracting pneumonia and passed away. It's a tragic end for a man whose mathematical logic would become the absolute cornerstone for the invention of the computer.
Section 3. John Wilder Tukey, Naming the Digital. Which brings us to the man who pulled Boole's algebra firmly into the modern computing era. Tukey's background is just as fascinating as our previous 2 figures.
Born in Massachusetts to two teachers, he was an only child who was completely homeschooled to best develop his potential. He started out at Brown University studying math and chemistry, got a master's in chemistry, and then completely pivoted his studies to math at Princeton. He gets his PhD in topology in 1939, but then World War II breaks out. So he joins the Fire Control Research Office, starts working in statistics, and just absolutely impresses the leading minds of the time. By 1945, he's a professor of statistics at Princeton and working at AT&T Bell Labs, eventually founding Princeton's statistics department in 1966.
And here's the thing. We literally use his vocabulary every single day. Tukey is the one credited with coining the exact term software to describe the programs and operating information used by a computer. He took these hard physical machines and gave a name to the logical instructions running inside them, instructions that were directly built on Boole's math and Aristotle's logic.
But naming the digital age? Yeah, that wasn't exactly a smooth process. When the world was trying to figure out what to call a binary digit, the fundamental ones and zeros of all computing, there were some seriously funny suggestions. Get this, terms like binit and bigot were actually pitched. Thankfully, those completely flopped and never caught on. Instead, Tukey is the one credited with coining the elegant term we all know today, the bit. And it was widely adopted almost immediately. Why? Simply because it felt like a natural, common, everyday English word. He made this super abstract mathematical concept instantly accessible to everyone. Beyond his famous vocabulary, though, Tukey's massive statistical contributions reached the highest levels of global importance. He's probably best known for co-inventing the fast Fourier transform with J.W. Cooley. It's a mathematical algorithm that basically makes all modern digital signal processing possible. But he didn't just stay cooped up in the classroom or the lab. He served on the President's Science Advisory Committee, chaired crucial committees on the environment, chemicals, and education, and even worked on nuclear disarmament. His brilliant career was rightfully capped off by being awarded the incredibly prestigious National Medal of Science.
Section 4. The Human Code.
We've covered a lot of ground across thousands of years today. So what does this all mean, and why does it matter? Because this is a literal generational relay race of human intellect. Think about it. Step 1. Aristotle establishes systematic logic, dodging political turmoil so his ideas could survive hidden in a vault for 200 years. Step 2. George Boole, overcoming poverty and a total lack of formal education, pulls that logic into the realm of mathematics and algebra. And finally, Step 3. John Wilder Tukey takes that math, applies it to modern statistics and computing, and literally codes it into the very bits and software you are utilizing to watch this right this second. Each genius handed the baton to the next, stretching across centuries. As we close out this incredible story of human progress, I really want to leave you with one provocative thought. Given how incredibly far we've come, from an orphan in ancient Greece to a cobbler's son in England to a homeschooled statistician in America, what will future minds build upon this incredible 2,000-year-old foundation? The next unlikely genius is out there right now, and I, for one, cannot wait to see what they code next.